Welcome to our presentation, Moral Injury and its Effects on Military Personnel. This is a collaborative project created by Ketsia, Simran, Humda, and Chelsea for Social Work 435, Military and Family Practice. Morals are a universal standard for how humans should exist in relation to their fellow human beings and their greater environment. They are a definition of what is right and wrong. An example of a moral is telling the truth. A moral injury is when the individual experiences a psychological conflict, when their personal morals are violated due to a potentially morally injurious event, also known as PMIEs. How they perceive and react to PMIEs determines the severity of the moral injury. PMIEs include an act an individual commits, is forced to perform or witness, a failure to intervene, and a sense of betrayal by those in command. Military personnel engage in high-risk and volatile environments where they must make life and death decisions instantaneously. This rapid decision-making in high-conflict situations with the authority to use weapons results in decisions that can later cause psychological distress and moral injury. According to the Atlas Institute for Veterans and Families, examples of PMIEs that can trigger moral injury in military personnel are being unable to help ill or wounded civilians, including children, not reporting an event that violates the rules of engagement or codes of conduct for service members, giving or carrying out orders that harm civilians or non-combatants, carrying out orders that you think are immoral, and not receiving support for violence or aggression perpetrated against you during service. The Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment explains that moral injury is caused by PMIEs, the context of the event, and how the military personnel perceive the event. Context can include the number and intensity of PMIEs, the role played by the person regarding the PMIE, the perceived agency a person had during the PMIE, and the perception they have of their own morals, ethics, and values. And finally, the possibility to repair the violation that has occurred. Thompson 2015 explains that not everyone will perceive a PMIE the same way. If the military personnel cannot rationalize the event and views it as a personal failing instead of an event controlled by external factors, moral injury ensues, and they begin to have beliefs about themselves as being immoral, irredeemable, and unrepairable. And a crisis of conscience develops that disrupts an individual's confidence about his or her own moral behavior or others' capacity to behave in a just and ethical manner. Both the Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment and Thompson agree that it is not just the PMIE that causes the moral injury, but it is also the process of how the individual tries to make sense of the event, and usually that results in strategies that are maladaptive, dangerous, and even lethal. Moral injury causes damage to the individual's character, identity, and deepest sense of self. And then self-destructive behaviors begin to manifest, such as poor self-care, alcohol and drug abuse, severe recklessness, parasuicidal behavior, and self-sabotage and demoralization. The Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment provides a list of how moral injury affects the entire person. Psychological effects include intrusive thoughts, lack of concentration, self-hate, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. Emotional effects include guilt, anger, hatred, shame, remorse, loneliness, hopelessness, and helplessness. Social effects include distrust of others, role confusion, identity loss, dysfunctions in intimacy, isolation, dysfunctional introversion. Spiritual effects include disruption of self-identity, disrupted beliefs, loss of faith, and struggling to forgive. Occupational effects can include disrupted skill and competence, loss of job satisfaction, conflict at work, absences, and job loss. There are several treatment options for moral injury, as discussed by the Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment and Thompson. One of them is adaptive disclosure. In this approach, the individual who experienced the PMIE imagines that they're explaining the event to someone that they respect. and in return they role play how that person would guide and advise them. The therapist intervenes to help the individual formulate a new narrative about the experience, and the moral identity of this individual is rebuilt again by making amends and atoning for their actions by planning and carrying out future good work. Other treatment options include practicing forgiveness, meaning-making, and compassion, as well as self-care approaches such as eating well, exercising, maintaining a suitable work-life balance, praying, meditation, and spending time in nature.
Case study. This is a case study about Sergeant Michael Brooks, a 34-year-old U.S. Army infantryman who has been in service for 10 years. He completed 4 combat deployments in high-intensity conflict zones. Known for his leadership and dedication, Michael was respected among his peers and upheld his duties with a strong sense of loyalty and ethical responsibilities. However, during his last tour, he was tasked with leading a mission in densely populated areas where intelligence suggested enemy forces were hiding. Following military protocol, Michael's team engaged in combat, which ultimately led to significant civilian casualties, including children. Although Michael followed orders and adhered to the standard operational procedures, he feels personally responsible for the loss of innocent lives. This overwhelming guilt, coupled with a sense of betrayal by a military institution he once trusted, has led to what mental health professionals refer to as moral injury. Unlike PTSD, which often involves fear and hyperarousal, moral injury is characterized by profound ethical dissonance, leading to inner conflict, shame, and loss of self-identity. Since returning home, Michael's demeanor has changed significantly. He experiences frequent episodes of emotional numbness, often retreating to his room or going for long drives alone to escape overwhelming thoughts. His wife, Laura, who has managed the household and supported Michael through previous deployments, is now feeling the weight of his emotional absence. She reports that Michael has become irritable, easily frustrated with children, and detached from daily family activities. Previously active in family life, Michael now avoids gatherings, social events, and even simple activities like family dinners. The children ages 8 and 11 have sensed his withdrawal and feel confused, unsure why their father no longer engages with them as he once did. They often ask Laura, their mother, if they've done something wrong, increasing her feelings of isolation and helplessness. With all this information, we see how this has impacted family dynamics of Michael. Michael's moral injury has disrupted the family's previously close-knit dynamics. Laura feels as though she'd lost her husband emotionally, even though he is physically present. She struggles with the dual responsibilities of parenting and supporting Michael while managing her own mental health and resilience. The lack of communication and emotional connection with Michael has left her feeling overwhelmed as she attempts to shield the children from the tension. The children, confused by their father's abrupt distance, have started to express behavior changes in school, with teachers noting decreased concentration and signs of sadness.
Having now discussed the struggles faced by Michael and his family, it's important that we spend some time going over how to actually apply social work theory to support public safety personnel that are going through moral injury the way Michael is. So social work as a profession has the ability to conduct interventions at micro, meso, and macro levels, which makes it unique amongst other health-related professions. This means that social work can support Michael and others like him at an individual level, a family or group level, and an organizational level, which would allow Michael to receive the holistic, wraparound supports that he needs in order to heal from this injury in every area of his life. By using systems frameworks in particular, you can gain a comprehensive understanding of the injuries suffered by a public safety personnel, since they help you see clear connections between systems and people and thus make it easier to develop an intervention strategy. Two of the main theories that could help us understand what Michael and his family are going through as a result of his moral injury are family systems theory and social ecological theory. So, family systems theory essentially claims that every family is greater than the sum of its parts. This means that each individual family member, the relationship with other members, and the family unit as a whole all have an ongoing and mutual impact on each other. Therefore, it's important to understand individual family members within the context of the larger family system, and not just as islands unto themselves. Social ecological theory, on the other hand, while also a systems-based theory, it focuses on the interconnections between families as well as the larger social and societal systems within which that family is embedded. So examples of social systems would be like religious institutions, healthcare systems, policies, and government agencies, to name a few. So the functioning of these outside systems will affect the overall well-being of the family unit, which means that if an outside system is failing or is not able to live up to its potential, that could have massive consequences on the well-being of the family and each of its individual members. If we were to actually apply family systems theory to Michael's situation, we would be able to see the interrelationships within the family and how each of them impacts individual family members. So we already know that Michael is becoming increasingly emotionally absent within his family life. His emotional absence is affecting his wife Laura significantly, since she now has to both take care of him and his needs while also managing the household and the children by herself. This is putting her under a lot of strain, which is felt by the children. And the children were already struggling to adjust to the new Michael, and now by having a mom who's stressed thin, they don't have anyone there to support them, and they're acting out, which increases Laura's stress as well as Michael's, and his feelings of not being able to be present for his family. Like similarly, if you apply social ecological theory to Michael and his family, we can see how Michael's mental health and sense of self has been impacted by military culture and protocol that demands obedience of orders regardless of what you think about them and whether or not you oppose them. Michael is probably also affected by the culture of stoicism that permeates through the culture of the military, which emphasizes keeping your feelings bottled up and restraining from asking for help since it's believed to show weakness. Laura and the children are also impacted by outside systems. For example, they don't seem to really have any access to mental health supports that are usually available for family members of public safety personnel, which is only worsening their stress. While systems theories definitely help us understand the overall family dynamics and needs of Michael, Laura, and their children, it's also important before planning any interventions to delve deeper into the feelings of ambiguous loss being felt by members of the family. So, psychological ambiguous loss is defined as the emotional or psychological absence of a family member who's still physically present within the family. Ambiguous loss leads to confusion and ambiguity about who's included and who's excluded from the family system, which is a risk factor for overall family well-being since it leads to feelings of hopelessness and helplessness in adjusting to the new personality of the injured family member, and it affects the dynamics of the whole family. The psychological ambiguous loss is exactly what is impacting Michael and his family. He's fully present within the household, but his withdrawn nature makes everyone feel as if he might as well not be. Like the kids are feeling confused about his transformation in personality and his role as a father. And Laura is struggling with adjusting with caring for a husband who's absent and unavailable.
Implementation of trauma-informed practice. Trauma-informed practice approach. According to EVAM 2016, trauma-informed practice focuses on understanding, recognizing, and responding to trauma's effects on individuals and their families. In Michael's case, Trauma-informed care TIC should prioritize his sense of safety, empowerment, and connection with a focus on supporting him in processing his moral injury. Creating safety. Michael may feel a significant sense of guilt and self-blame, which can impact his willingness to engage in therapy or family activities. To create a foundation of safety, the social worker can start by establishing a non-judgmental environment where Michael feels secure and supported. This involves normalizing his experience and validating his feelings of shame and guilt without pressuring him to address all aspects of his trauma immediately. Secondly, for his family, ensuring safety means creating an environment where they feel emotionally secure to express their concerns. Involving Laura in the counseling process will allow her to gain insights into Michael's moral injury, giving her the tool to support him better without feeling isolated in her role. Establishing trustworthiness and transparency. Given Michael's sense of betrayal by the military institution, building trust will be essential. The social worker should be transparent about the therapeutic process and give Michael control over the pace of his treatment. For instance, explaining each stage of the therapy and respecting Michael's boundary can help build his trust. Secondly, transparency with Laura and the children can help them understand Michael's experience and age-appropriate ways. This can reduce misunderstanding and help the children see that their father's distance is unrelated to their actions. Empowerment, voice, and choice. Empowering Michael involves giving him a sense of agency over his treatment plan. The social worker can encourage Michael to practice in setting therapeutic goals and choosing coping strategies that resonate with him. For example, the social worker might introduce grounding technique or mindfulness practices, but ultimately let Michael decide which strategy he finds most helpful. Secondly, empowering Laura as a support partner is also crucial. The social worker can help her build resilience through coping strategy and perhaps even connect her with support network for spouses of military personnel. A cultural and historical sensitivity play a vital role. Michael's sense of identity and pride in his military role is integral to his self-concept, and his moral injury is directly tied to his role as a soldier. The social worker should approach Michael's trauma with respect for his military background and recognize that his moral injury results from ethical conflict than a failure of character. Secondly, addressing cultural stigma around mental health in the military may also be essential. This involves validating Michael's identity as a soldier and reframing seeking help as an act of strength, not weakness. Importance of trauma-informed implementation. According to Kelly, the implementation of trauma-informed practice is critical in addressing the complex issue faced by Sergeant Michael Brooks and his family. Moral injury, which stem from profound ethical conflict and personal guilt, differ from post-traumatic stress disorder and present unique therapeutic challenge. TIP, which prioritizes understanding and responding to trauma with sensitivity and compassion, offers a framework for addressing both Michael's experience and the broader family impact. Secondly, in Michael's case, TIP provides a compassionate and comprehensive framework that addresses the layered complexities of moral injuries. By creating a supportive environment that prioritizes understanding, choice, and empowerment, TIP enables Michael and his family to approach his healing journey with resilience and clarity. This approach not only addresses his individual needs, but also promotes healings within the family unity, ultimately enhancing their collective well-being and ability to navigate the effects of moral injury.
Lessons learned and areas for growth. The first lesson that we learned from this is the importance of recognizing moral injury as distinct from PTSD. One key lesson is the need for social workers to understand unique characteristics of moral injury as distinct from PTSD. We know that while PTSD involves fear-based trauma responses, moral injury, on the other hand, centers on deep feelings of guilt, shame, and ethical dissonance, which require different approaches. Recognizing the difference allows for more targeted interventions that focus on moral and ethical healing. For example, providing non-judgmental spaces where individuals like Michael can process feelings of guilt and rebuild a sense of self-worth. Understanding these differences is essential for creating trauma-informed and ethical and empathetical responses that address the full scope of the individual's suffering. Another lesson learned is the role of family in healing and reintegration. As we've seen, this case emphasizes the importance of involving family in the treatment process, because Michael's moral injury not only impacts him or his well-being, but also the emotional health and stability of his wife, Laura, and their children. Therefore, including family members in therapy can foster a shared understanding and help restore communication channels the moral injury often disrupts. By acknowledging the family's role and providing resources that support both Michael and Laura, we as social workers can help build a supportive environment that fosters mutual resilience and reinforces familial bonds. And I believe that this approach aligns with the ecosystems theory, which considers the interconnectedness of the individual and their environment. Additionally, implementing trauma-informed care to address ethical distress. As we know, trauma-informed care approaches are especially valuable in cases of moral injury where individuals face ethical dilemmas that may conflict with their values. A trauma-informed framework encourages practitioners to prioritize safety, trustworthiness, and empathy when interacting with clients. For Michael, in his case, establishing a therapeutic alliance grounded in these principles could encourage him to openly share his experiences without fear of judgment. The trauma-informed care approach also allows social workers to tailor interventions based on resilience theory, helping clients to draw on internal and external strengths as they navigate the healing journey. There is a quote that my spiritual father always says, "A perfume can never smell the same on everybody. So it doesn't matter if we use the same perfume, we're all going to smell different," right? So in Michael's case, it doesn't matter how many clients that we worked with. Understanding that, focusing on his personal strengths, personal resilience story can help him better and his family on this healing journey. Reflecting on the need for self-awareness and culture sensitivity in practice. Working with clients like Michael highlights the necessity for social workers to cultivate self-awareness and culture sensitivity, particularly when dealing with military personnel. The military distinct culture, emphasizing duty, loyalty, and strength, may lead individuals to feel reluctant to seek support due to perceived stigma. As practitioners, we must reflect on our own biases and understand the military ethos to engage effectively with clients. Culturally sensitive approaches that respect the values and identity of military personnel can reduce stigma and encourage openness, ultimately supporting a more inclusive and effective practice.
So one thing that I learned by conducting this project is the importance of understanding systems and their interconnectedness and how this plays into an individual's well-being. Like, for example, what Michael is going through is definitely an individual struggle, but it's also a familial struggle. It's also an organizational struggle. The interaction of all these systems, like from the family unit to the workplace to the larger community, medical institutions, all of these directly impact the experiences that public safety personnel like Michael go through when suffering through occupational stress injuries like moral injury. Only by providing holistic, wraparound interventions that support public safety personnel in every area of their lives can they begin to heal and rehabilitate from their injuries.
In their 2024 article, Lumpkin et al. Challenged their readers to consider that moral injury is not a pathological condition to be treated. That's because humans are not machines when they're placed in high conflict and violent situations. Instead, they are moral beings who are interacting with their environment and reflecting on their actions. So moral injury is actually a necessary feature of a healthy and ethical human conscience. Moral injury is like the canary in the coal mine that tells us that we have crossed our limits and are violating our basic human morals. Talking about what happens in war and the guilt and shame that's associated with it protects future military personnel because you're bringing light to an issue that's usually hidden from mainstream society, and it pushes governments to use restraint and behave with morality in war.